Welcome to this next talk. We have Mack Paloma, and I think he's talking about AI and translation. So please give a warm welcome to Mack.
So, a short little presentation. It's very much a question of who am I? So it all depends on context. So when I go out traveling and I come to immigration, I'm a passport number for the immigration officer. When I go to the shop and I buy something, I am a payment method. I used to play the violin. I wouldn't say I play very much anymore, but if I'm on stage with a violin, I'm a violinist. At home, I have a completely different role. And when I was working in Luxembourg, once upon a time, I was an accidental comedian. So I had I was going to get a new secretary. And I was interviewing a lot of people, and then one of the ladies came up who was a native French speaker. I introduced myself and said, "Hello, I'm Mack." And she totally cracked up laughing. And I didn't really understand why. Well, it turned out that the Mack in French has a very special meaning. You can look it up if you're interested. So, context always matters. And understanding cultural nuance matters a lot too. So the big question then that many people ask, why am I doing all this with the translation? And I'm creating a global platform, which I'm going to probably have to support more than 100 languages. And when I was looking at all the options I had to do something like this, there weren't that many options really. It's if I wanted something to work and do it my way, there was Plone. But language is something which carries a very, very heavy burden. And I'm going to do regulatory compliance, and then people have a lot of requirements that it's got to be accurate, it's got to be perfect. And I don't want to be sued every second day. So, what's the challenge when you are doing translations? When you do longer translations, it's sometimes a little bit easier, but UI translations are a little bit tricky because the strings are very short sometimes. Sometimes it's only a word and there is no context. It still has to be culturally appropriate and precise. And you have to be able to deliver the message, the meaning, across all languages. And to give an idea of the kind of problems you can get, what happened here? Here.
Maybe I think it's because...
There it comes. Okay. So, even in English, you know, it's we very quickly come across a lot of very ambiguous terms that mean the same thing. And when you're going to do this kind of translation, then the question is, which words is the translator going to choose out of all these possible combinations that you have? And in Plone, ever since Volto came, it's two worlds. It's all got the same goal, but it's definitely two completely different worlds. On the back end, we have getText, which is the standard which was sort of adopted from the very beginning. And they built scripts and a lot of other things to support it. So we have a getText workflow there, which is from POT files to PO files. Does everyone know what the POT and PO files are? Anyone who doesn't know? Yeah. And on the Volto front end, basically we have a React International Format.js structure, which is a little bit different. But in the Plone world, they've made adaptations so that we are still living with POT and PO files, and then they get converted to JSON or to JSON files. So when I started all this, I thought this was going to be really easy. And I thought that this is a very basic translation job. But it turned out it's not that easy. Now, the people I spoke to in the very beginning about getting started with Plone, they were all a little bit proud that it was all standards-based. And if you're going to work with something really serious, it has to be based on some kind of standards. So I was very optimistic about all this, and I thought, great, we've got perfect standards. So if we look a little bit at the timelines that we have here, we see that getText was started in 1995, and that was before Plone was started. But then we have React International, the JavaScript internationalization library that came in 2014, which is much later than Plone. Then we look at other standards which have to do with translation. We see that we have ISO 639, and this has a lot to do with language codes. We've got, this came in 1967, it's been around for quite a long time. We have ISO 704, 1968. Then we have ISO 3166, which is 1974. Then we have the old POSIX standard, which is from 1988. But then we come to a little bit more modern standards, like ISO 15924, which came in 2004. We have BCF 47, 2006, and ISO 30042, which came in 2008. Now, all these new standards which came later, they are the explanation why this turned out to be a lot trickier than I ever expected that it would be. Because Plone had already been going for a long time when a lot of these standards came in. So one of the most important standards when it comes to translation is ISO 704. And the core principle there is that you work on concepts, and these concepts is what you translate. And the concept is supposed to be language independent. And you can ask yourself, how is that even possible for a concept to be language independent? You have to be able to describe it somehow. So the whole thing is that you give it an abstract name, an ID of some kind, and then you are free to describe it in many different languages, but it needs to be a description of a concept. It is not necessarily the actual translation words. So one concept is one meaning, and it's really a matter of how you can do that conversion of a concept to a meaning in a way that you can let someone else look at it. So the concept we can look at, for example, the act of preserving data permanently. This has got to do with saving data. But to dig into this a little bit, it really becomes a little bit of a philosophy lesson and a lesson in trying to understand really how we as humans communicate with each other. But the people who wrote this standard and who've been working on this is not something which is people have been looking at these kind of issues for hundreds of years, even thousands of years. So I think that these are good places to start when you are looking at standards. Then when it comes to being able to take these concepts and put them into some kind of file which is useful, they created a standard called TBX. It's basically an XML file which contains the concept descriptions, and then it contains a lot of details in various languages. Now the EU, they have some big databases. It's many tens of thousands of concepts that they have from different areas. It's a free database, you can download it, and this is something that can then be used as a tool later on. I'll come back to that. So if we look at the language, script, and region standards that we have different language codes. And when you look at Plone, you see that some people use uppercase, lowercase, they use dash, they use underscore. And in the beginning I thought, oh, this is very sloppy and these are people who don't know what they're doing. But when you start looking at this very carefully, you discover that this really is a little bit reflection on when they started to work with it. Because people who have started very much later maybe have adopted one of the newest standards. And POSIX, for example, which has been around for ages, uses underscores, whereas the React and the more modern standards, they use a hyphen. But all these standards, they are very precise. And it's been very interesting to come across all the differences and try to understand why we have so many differences. So these different standards, they all have a relationship with each other. And looking at these, they really help you understand a little bit the structure of language and how you can convey meaning in a way which is compact. So if we look at ISO 704 and you want to map that into software, you go from the concept to a software analog, and then you have some examples there, as you can see. So there's a concept called the serialization, which is the bridge between meaning and the implementation. And basically, in practice, this means that you have to go from a concept to a file where you have that concept in some kind of usable terms or terminology that can be displayed on a screen, for example, or spoken to someone. And the fundamental principle here is that you separate the meaning from the form. And this principle, it really governs everything to do with linguistic theory, with terminology management and software engineering. If we go very briefly to the workflows that we have in Plone, what we do in Plone is that we have source code, and the source code has been prepared in such a way that it is easy to extract strings which are translatable. So there is a tool which was developed from the very beginning. I think it's been around for a long time, about 20 years at least, which is called the I18Dude. And what it basically does, you run this script and it will take out all of the strings which are translatable, and it will put them into a master file. In Volto, we have something called PNPM I18N, which is also a script, and it scans the JSX for messages that can be translated, and they get compiled into a POT file. And those POT files get converted then into localized PO files, and these files in turn then get converted into JSON. Now, the problem we have today, something which kept me busy for a very long time, was the fact that we end up with files which have very much the structure that you see above there. You see there is a comment after a dot. The dot after the hash mark means that it's been extracted from text. So it's been searching through the source files, and it has found a string which could be translated, and in this case that string is the message ID. This is heading search results, and when you have the top, the default up there, this is literally the source string which is to be translated. Now the interesting thing is that if you do not have this, the source string that needs to be translated is the message ID. But the message ID is also a key which carries along, which says where this should be delivered or served in the program or in the app. And there is a rule which says that if default exists, you translate the string from default. If it doesn't exist, you have to translate from message ID. Now, I did a little bit of analysis, and I discovered that in Plone, 43% of the POT messages had a default comment. In Volto, all of them had it. And in widgets, which is one of the translation domains, none of them had it. So there's a big variation in how this works when you are preparing your source files and getting that ready. So if I look a little bit at the AI framework approach that I've been doing, I'm doing this quite fast because unfortunately, I'm assuming a little bit of knowledge on your end to do this, because we don't have a lot of time to really go into details, but this is really a fascinating area, and I was a little bit sort of disappointed when I started to work on this, and I thought, this Plone is nothing for me, when I realized that it seemed very messy. But it's become very apparent to me that this is not at all messy. This is really pure gold from the part of the people who've developed it. They've managed to keep Plone and Volto together within a single kind of framework in such a way that nothing breaks, and no one's been complaining about any things which have been a little bit inconsistent, because things have been so robustly built that they just keep working. And it's only if you start doing crazy things like I've been doing that things start to break. And then I have to call on the poor people who are maintaining the source code, and they have to fix things for just me. So I feel a little bit guilty. Anyway, what I've been doing with the AI framework is that I've been looking at controlled glossaries and semantic buckets. I've been looking at context packaging in prompts. I've been looking at the alignment of getText and the ICU standards. Then the other thing which I'm very, very interested in is these cross-language validation checks, to be able to compare translations across languages, and in this way try to get accurate results with AI. And then have some kind of automated quality assurance for ambiguous terms. So if we look at the AI translation pipeline, it's a little bit like this, that you have to extract the source strings from the pot files. Now the pot files can, the source string can be either in the line which has the default in it, and if it doesn't exist, you have to get it from the message ID. So the way to do it is you do a coalesce where you select the default text if it's there, otherwise you fall back to the message ID. Then what you do is you look at the package context, and what we have in Plone is we have different domains. And there is the domains are meant so that different areas can have a different place to live in such a way that you can differentiate a little bit on the context. And the other thing that I've been doing is that I've been looking at the industry glossaries and so on. Now, all the big enterprises, they have really good glossaries. Now, I can't share any of that because it's okay for personal use, and I've been playing around this for personal use so far, but the EU has this really excellent library, and like I said, it's tens of thousands of terms. It's 1.5 gigabytes of text. And I've been looking at these glossaries a little bit. Some of the glossaries are completely irrelevant because they might be medical terms, or they might be car mechanics terms, or you know, they have different groups and all this, but it's very interesting. Then it's possible to put in translation guardrails, where you have validation rules and verification gates. So if we look at the thing that's really important is context. And this is what I started with when I presented myself a little bit. And somehow, to get AI to work properly, you have to provide it some kind of context. And the way that we can look at context is we can do a little bit of packages for it. We can look at the purpose and audience. We can look at what part of speech it is. We can look at the UI region, and we can look at domain and the workflow that you have. But then we can also look at it from a point of view of semantic buckets, or glossaries. Like we have actions, states, roles, navigation, content, and system. Now, the industry databases, they have actually done a lot of this categorization and everything. And when you look at the industry databases, you can usually find reasonably good data for about 100 different languages. All the languages are a little bit different in their coverage and accuracy and so on. And these databases usually give a rating of how accurate they believe they are, and they are more or less complete. Some languages are not very complete at all. And then you can also look at how everything aligns with standards. And one of the things which I've been looking at, which is a very low-hanging fruit, you just look at how strings are written in the Plone code. How consistently are they written, and to which standard do they follow? Now, I was wondering, which standard do you follow in Plone? Well, any ideas? Which standard does Plone follow?
Copy-paste.
I think that's about as good as answer as we can get. So it really comes down to, I think everyone is following a standard, but it depends which standard they came across and at which time. And if you started with one standard earlier on, most likely you'll stick to it, and someone comes a little bit later and they use a later standard. Maybe instead of using underscore, they will use a hyphen. Instead of using capitals, they will use small letters, and these kind of things. And then we have ICU message formatting, which has to do a lot with how you count, how you do plurals. And like I said, we have these POSIX locales, which deal with the underscores and so on. So, and when you automate, then you can create quality assurance flags. And you can look at terms which really depend a lot on content or context. Some words, they are self-contained. Other words, they really need a lot of context. So you can flag all those words which really need context. And what I've been doing now is that I've been doing this cross-language validation, and currently in Plone we have, I think, the 71, 72, 73 languages, depending a little bit on how you count the languages, but they're around in the 70s. And what I've been doing is that I've been looking at inconsistent capitalization patterns, when you have capital letters, and this is different in different languages, of course, but if you look at the original source English, this should be very consistent and should be very smooth. And you can look at gender and plural form mismatches like he, she, and it, and you can look at how you deal with plurals in many ways. And these are very low-hanging fruits in English, at least, because this is something, of course, that we don't have to translate if we are reasonably fluent in English. And then we can have a little bit of look at the cultural appropriateness. There's a lot of words historically which are a little bit troublesome for many cultures, depending on their history and what they've gone through, and very much is rooted in colonialism, in violence, in abuse, in shame. And it's quite important to have a little bit of an understanding of all this. Now, Microsoft, for example, they have a style guide for every language, but the style guide is typically about 16 pages, and it looks at every possible way that a language can be communicated in a good and in a bad way. So there's a lot of resources out there, and a lot of people have put a lot of work into it. And these are the kind of things that you learn a little bit from locals. Now, the way Microsoft did it is a bit too much, I think. It's we're not going to do 16-page PDFs for every language where we are looking at the appropriateness of it, but the principle is very good. So I got a little bit fed up, and I decided that I couldn't just work with the POT files. I had to create a little database. And to my great surprise, I discovered that we had PostgreSQL in Plone, and it was just a matter of deploying that and importing all the original source POT file message strings and all the translation strings and putting them into the database, and then I could manipulate them and do all kinds of wonderful things that you can only do in a database. So for me, this has been a real paradigm shift. So my translation database now has 4,829 unique messages which are in Plone. Now, the sad thing about all this is that this comes from source code. So what I do with all this, I will come back to this, and this is something which will come back and haunt me all the time, because in the end, whatever I do here will never be complete unless the process gets completed on the source code end. Because every time when you do a new extraction and you're using the tools that we have available, this will give the same problem every time. But PostgreSQL has full Unicode support, which means that it will take every script that there is. It'll take the left to right languages, right to left languages. So I can do Chinese, Thai, Arabic, Hebrew, I mean, you name it. This will do everything. It'll do Hindi. And I can get some kind of semantic context extraction from the file paths. And what I've done also then is that I've taken some of these really big databases and I've integrated that into the database that I have. And then I do cross-checking with some of the industry stuff to kind of see where is Plone compared to the industry. So any guesses where do you think Plone stands right now? Is Plone good or bad compared to the rest of the industry when it comes to UI translations? Better than average.
Slightly better than average, but very much depending on where we have actually been.
But if you look overall, I mean, if you just look from a big picture, and I've taken in these enormous data sets, and I look at the quality of some of the big enterprise data sets, I thought, oh, Plone was a rather good choice for me. So it's possible to do these kind of cross-language consistency checks, but it still needs some kind of human review to double-check the results. So if we look at some of the things that you can do with the database is we have, for example, context-aware processing. Now, we can put rich metadata in the prompts. We can use the domain, and we can, there's a lot of things which we can infer from the messages that we have. So sometimes it's very good, this context-aware processing, and unfortunately it doesn't always work, but AI does a fairly good job of it today. If we look at the semantic understanding via glossaries, this means that you look very much at the concept-oriented kind of, you go back to the ISO 704 principles, where you have a concept, and then you have a description, and you try to keep this as independent as possible. So I've been comparing, for example, Microsoft and Google with these kind of things. And what AI does, what none of the other glossaries or anything do, maybe they've started to do this also, the Microsoft, as I'm sure they'll be doing all this as well, but that is pattern learning. And this really doesn't have to do anything with the understanding, but this is just looking statistically at patterns. And then you can look at the automated quality assurance and validation. And this really has to do with cross-checking, and you can do a lot of validation against some of the standards like TBX. The EU's big library is actually a very good resource. But the other thing that AI is rather good is the handling of complex grammars. Now, there are some languages which are particularly difficult, and one of them is Basque. And I know that we have some people in the community which are from a region where they have this language, and it's a language isolate. And this means that it's not comparable to any other language. It stands all on its own, it's got its own rules and everything. But this is a very good language to have as a comparator, because when you compare between languages, you then discover that this Basque actually becomes quite a good quality control as well. The thing then is to sort of work back and forward a little bit to build up the vocabulary there, because it's not really 100% yet. It's got a way to go, and it's quite fantastic. So the paradigm shift is really that rather than you look at a very static situation with the pot profiles, we now have a situation where we can work much more dynamically, where we have these databases and where we have AI, and we can sort of continuously sort of follow up what's going on. Now, unfortunately, in the pot files, there is a field which has to do with context. It's a comment field, and that comment field would be able to give a lot of extra information to translators or to AI or whatever. It doesn't exist at all in Plone. No one has put it in. This is something, you know, that people who are starting to write code could start to think about a little bit. So AI won't completely replace translators, but it will definitely make their experience much more efficient. Now, AI really, really loves structured data. When you have structured data, you can do all kinds of magic. And when you have everything in a SQL database, what you can do is you can create queries, and those queries then can be exported into JSON. And when you give this JSON to AI, AI will just light up. I mean, the whole computer starts to nearly smoke, and you see just happiness coming out of the screen when AI sees this. And what you can do then is you can very easily create language sets. So what you can do is you can select which languages you want to compare with each other. You can export this into JSON, and then you can let AI do its little magic with it. So this is really quite fantastic. And it's actually very scalable. And you see, when you start putting things in like that, there are all these kind of things which come out immediately. Like I put this in, you know, I was just checking the existing Swedish translation, for example. Then you discover that there were wrong words and all the kind of things that you see here which are problematic. And these have been around for maybe since Plone started. No one's really bothered about it, and no one's had to bother about it. It hasn't been really important. Now, again, I have to be a little bit selfish and say that it's only me who's worried about it right now. So, but if we are going to deploy AI in a wider fashion, and we want to be able to automate more, this is something that needs to be looked at. So I've already spoken about grouping dissimilar language patterns. For example, if you do English, Japanese, and Arabic, and you put them together, this is very, very powerful when it comes to giving clues to AI on how it can do a good translation. And I've already spoken quite a lot about the workflow. But the real work is all about updating the source code. So no matter how much work you put into all of this, you know, I'm playing around with my database and everything, and I can have control over my own Plone installation. And I can do what I want with it. I mean, this is not like someone else who says you're not allowed to look at the source code or anything. It's, but then it's just my own product, and if there's an update or something, it will all be gone if it's not corrected at source in the source code. The source code updates make any changes or any discoveries here permanent. So there is a little bit of a possible workflow that you could use for doing this work, and I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, we have only intelligent people here, so I don't have to really rub that in, and this is more or less repeating the same. And what we have here at the very end, this is the big challenge, is we somehow need to get some kind of documentation, some kind of style guide, some kind of standard, which is a Plone standard, so that everyone knows what to do. Right now it's copy and paste, as was suggested, and this is not the ideal situation for something which I think the deployment of Plone globally and in other places, it can be a real advantage if we have a very good language situation there. Now, I'm happy to work a lot on getting translations and everything done, but this is not an effort that I can do alone. I mean, Plone is a community effort. So there has to be some kind of community consensus. So generally, when it comes to this kind of style guides and so on, this is very often more, but nothing is much less than something. And that's it. You survived.
Thank you, Mack. I will give you the microphone. Yeah, we have time for questions. Yes, go ahead.
I have two questions, and I think is this on? Yeah. I think the most important one is you had like 5 seconds on the slide where you said, "Oh, that's all self-evident for you guys engineers." But my question is, when is your next talk that actually goes over your whole framework and shows us the code? Or do you have a repository for the code? Because I think
what I've done is that I have a repository. I was going to release it before the conference, but I've got so much proprietary stuff and I've got to clean up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I love documentation. And I'm talking about documentation tomorrow. AI has documented everything that I've talked about in enormous detail. I mean, so much that if you ever want to read about this, I have virtually a book in the repository.
Yeah, so I'm in charge of I'm doing the translations for Quave, and I'm really interested in reconstructing that whole pipeline that you have. So if we have documentation and code snippets and what AI prompts are you using, how are you loading this data into Postgres, how are you exporting it to JSON, all those steps, I'm interested in those.
Well, I've got you see, I've been parsing a lot of the code with local Python snippets.
Yes, that's what I mean.
AI has generated very kindly for me.
Yeah.
And I have all this documented, and I will release it, and I hope to release it by next week.
I have another question, but I don't want to hog the
mic.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. My other question is you mentioned basically it's a paradigm switch from translating strings to translating concepts.
Yes.
It suggests to me also something like having a knowledge graph or something like structured knowledge built into the system. Did you follow that approach somehow?
Well, the whole ISO 704 is basically that. And most people don't really like to read these standards. I really like reading also the standards document. I used to write a lot of standards myself in my early years. And if you just study a little bit, there's a lot of references here, to the standards. And even a quick skim through these standards, they will give you a lot of ideas. Now, when it comes to these knowledge graphs, AI is not so good at the intelligence. What AI, I mean, it's, I think many people say that it should not be called AI. I think we heard that this morning. It should be called machine learning. So what it's really good at is looking at patterns and statistics and looking at a lot of things which are very boring and very obvious. And what it then also does, it can do a lot of comparisons which are not really possible to do at the kind of scale that you can do with AI.
All right, thank you. Any more questions? Okay, thank you, Mack.
Thank you.